Hi everyone, welcome to this quick tutorial on Power BI. Let's also learn about Dax expressions, and that's basically your data analysis expressions. So it's basically collection of functions, operators and constants which can be used in formulas or expressions to calculate or return one or more values. Now we can basically add a new column, so we can do that, or we can also create new measures. Now, usually there is a shorter way of doing it. You can go into modeling, and here, as of now, nothing is highlighted because there is no data uploaded. We see just a new table. What I can do is I can go to home and I can, let's get our data, but this time I'll take the simpler data, although we can work on the same earlier data set which relates to IP addresses and all that. So that also can be done. And to learn, we can take up this particular data, which is global superstore, which we have used earlier. Now here I can select orders, I can select people, and I can also select returns. Now what we can do is before loading, we can just do some quick transformation on this particular data. So that opens up my Power Query editor. So here, if you remember, we have worked on this. This is returns. So what I can do is I can basically go in here. I can say use first row as headers. Now that's one transformation which I would want to do. Let's go into people, and it basically has person and region. We will still do the same thing, use first row as headers, so that gives me the name of the person and the person belongs to which particular region. You have then your orders data set, and here things look fine. So we can select different countries, we can select different product categories, we can basically work on your different use cases here, like we have seen earlier, picking up a category as technology, picking up a subcategory, and we can also create models based on these three data sets. So this looks perfectly fine to me. So let's go ahead and just do a close and apply, and let's have our data quickly loaded. Now, as I have explained earlier, it is good to do transformation, enough data wrangling so that your data is not huge when you're loading it, because then that will slow down your queries, slow down your visuals, slow down your reports, and so on. Now, this is the data we have. And say, for example, I would want to work on a visual. So we know how we can do that. So I can basically click on my orders. I can look at the aggregated columns such as discount, might be postal code, might be profit. And it depends if you have basically not change the data types. Now, if you see here, postal code and summation really does not go well. Probably this has been loaded as a data type which is integer. But profit and quantity looks good. Row ID sales look good. So we can work on Dax expressions. Now here, if you go into the modeling, it says, do you want to create a new measure? You can create a new column that will get added to your visual. And here, when you are looking into the table, you can click on this, and this also gives you an option of creating a new measure or a new column, new quick measure, and you can work on DAX. So when I said DAX, let's quickly look at what or how DAX looks like. Talk about DAX, the simplest way to understand is knowing the basic syntax. So usually you first have some kind of measure name. So for example, we can say average about something. We can say, okay, let's say average sales. So that becomes one of my measure which I'm interested in calculating. Now, how do I calculate that? So for that, I use an operator, so which shows here. So that's your operator which you are going to use. And then you use a DAX function. So DAX has, or Power BI has a lot of functions which we can use. So for example, I would use a function like average, which we can choose from the drop down as we start typing in. Now this one as a function then needs a referred data table. So basically, let's say I would be interested in orders. So I can select my table or my data set, as you say, and then you can choose a particular column. So from orders, I would want to do an average on, say, sales, and I can key in the column name here. And that basically is my simplest DAX expression. So we can have a complicated way of looking at it, or we can basically say, okay, I would want to find out average sales, and I would want to might be look into a particular city, or where I would say it is per city. So might be I could say average sales, and then I could say by city or by year, or I would want to look into a particular year if we have the order date. So we can say greater than a particular order date. So we would want how our sales have got affected after a particular date, and that depends on the situation. So I can do that, and here I can say greater than order date. Now for that, obviously we have to use the operator, and then I would want to calculate. So I can basically say calculate. Now this is what I would want to find out. So I can say calculate, and then in calculate I can say let's take the column which we are interested in. So we can pass in something like a measure here. So for example, I can just say average sales. This is what I want, but I will give a separator here to filter out the data, and then I am going to use my order date. For example, I can basically say let's take orders, and in that I am taking order date, and then basically this order date has to be greater than or lesser than something. So here you are specifying your data set, your table, and the column. You are giving a filter here, and that's basically your DAX expression. So your DAX has different functions. So when we talk about these functions, like as I said, you are going for an average, or you're going to calculate something. So you have what we usually mean, or we use, is your predefined formulas. Now that can perform calculations by using specific values called arguments, so which are in particular order and structure. So always remember that when you talk about DAX, this always refers a complete column or a table. Now there are different categories of functions which we can work on. So you have date and time, such as date difference, or finding out now, or finding out a later time. You can use something like time intelligence, which is dates between first date and last date. You can go for information functions, which contains custom data. You can have logical functions, mathematical functions, statistical functions, text functions. You have basically working on parent-child relationships. So there are different function categories which can be used. And as I said, we can go for creating a new column or a new measure, and we can use this DAX for our data analysis. Now let's see how we do that. So say for example, I have my order date. Now I would want to work on this. So let's select, say for example, go to your data set, and you have a lot of data here. So you can basically go for all this data here, which shows me complete information of the different columns, and you can choose which columns you are interested in, which columns might be you would want to cut short. So for example, I have order ID, I have row ID, might be I don't want a row ID. So I can choose if I want to delete this, and you can say, okay, I would want to delete this. Now these are some changes which you are applying, and now if you see, there is no row ID, what we see here as a field. You start with your order ID, you have your category, you have your order date, shipment, and here you have your segment. And for example, we have country, region, market, category, subcategory, product name, sales, and then you have your quantity, discount, profit, and all of this. Now, what we can do is I can basically add something here. So this is the data which we have. And what we can do is we can continue working on this. So let's click on home, and here you have ways to transform the data. You have a new measure, you have quick measure, you have new column, and you can try out these. So for example, I can go into new column, and that basically says, okay, what is your column called? Now I can say, for example, as I was explaining, let's go for average sales. So let's call it average sales. Now that's what I'm interested in. Now I need to use an internal function. So let's type in AV, and that shows me, okay, so there is an inbuilt function called average. We can use this one. So you can just hit on enter, and now it says, okay, which is the data set you're interested in. Now based on the reports, based on the data sets I've used earlier, it shows me options of different tables what we have, or different data sets what we have. So let's choose orders. So this is what I'm interested in. You can go for double click, and that gets selected, and now it says, okay, you want average on sales, but which is the column which you would want to use? So we can go for category, we can go for country, we can go for customer ID. All of these are your different columns. So for example, I can go for something like country, and that basically gets selected. Now I can complete this by just closing the parenthesis, and that's basically my Dax function. So my Dax function is ready, and if you want, you can add details to it. So if you would want to continue your function, you can always do a shift enter, that takes you to the next line. If you do not want it, you can go back. You can add a comment by saying alt shift and letter A, and then you can say my first Dax function, and you can give in some information depending on what kind of function you are creating, and that basically allows you to create the function. So this is done. Now let's hit on enter, and basically it will say the function average cannot work with values of type string. And that's right. I mean, we basically chose the wrong country. I mean, you cannot have an average on country. So that's not right. I should use something where I have to take a numeric value. So for example, I will replace this. So I will say I want average sales, and here I can choose what should I take. So for example, let's go for sales, and that's what I would want. So it says order sales, and then hit on enter, and it basically has populated my new column, but then it is basically taking average sales, and it has taken average sales overall. Now we have just selected a column, we have not given any filter, so it just gives me average, and it populates every row with this one. Now, this is fine that we have added a column. It has the same average value, and that basically gives me sales on average. So as I said, your Dax function always references a complete column or a complete table, and then basically it adds the value. Now let's see how we can use this. If you notice, the field or the column has got added here. Let's get into visualization, and what I can do is I can basically choose one of the type of visualizations. So for example, if I choose this, and say for example I would be adding this average sales, and that is the data I would want to look into. So what we can do is we can just say, okay, I'm interested in this average sales. It shows me the function, and we can add it here. Now this is just giving me the average sales overall. Now that really doesn't make sense. Let's look at this one, or plot a graph. So it gives me what is the average sales, and it gives me some visualization. So we can create visualization like this based on our column. Now what we can also do is we can go back to our data and we can go for different functions. So as I said, you can create a function that adds a column. Now let's go for something else. So I will say average sales, and I would be interested in, say, a particular product. Now we have average sales, and that is the measure which we can use. So for example, I would want to find out wherein the year, or let's look at the date field here. So for example, we have country as France. It is telling me city, it is giving me customer name, it gives me a segment. So let's choose a different field and we can filter by that. So for example, I'll say average sales by, or whatever name you want to give, let's say segment. Now what I will do here is, instead of using this average, so I will go for something like calculate. Now I can go for calculate, I can go for concatenate. So let's go for calculate, and we know that we have a particular column. So let's go for this one, which is, let's open up a bracket here. So let's go here, let's give our column name. So that could be your average sales. So let's look at what was the column name, and we have average sales with A and S as capital. So let's go for average, and then let's go for sales. Now this is what I want to do, but on what? So let's choose this, and here I'm going to now choose orders. So, and then we have to basically look at the column which has the segment value. So segment, now this is what I would want to use, and then we can try giving a value to this. So you have segment as corporate. So for example, let's say, let's go for, so it says calculate, give an expression which we have already given, that's your average sales. Or we can basically give the expression what we did earlier, and then you go for a filtering value. So I'm saying order segment, and let's go for something like corporate. Now that's going to be my segment. Let's close this one. So here's the example. What you do is you give your measure name. So that says average sales by segment. You can do a calculate. Now here you have to pass in a measure. So for example, I'm saying average, and I'm saying take an average for sales. That is, give me an average value of sales. But what I'm interested in is when the order segment is corporate. So I'm giving a filter here, and then it gives me average sales by segment. So that's the column value here, and it is basically filtering out based on the segment being corporate. So segment is our particular column here, which is showing up somewhere. Let me see, where is my segment column? So we have your product. Now I have, let's search for country, city, postal code, customer ID. And since we have chosen order sales, it is giving me this average value, and you can choose a different column, or you can say profit is greater than something else. So I would be only interested in those values, and you can continue adding things to your Dax expression. And this is how you can do here. So basically what I did was, we were using a measure which is average order sales. I said my segment has to be corporate, or basically you can just say segment has to exist. So you can say a Boolean value like equals true. Now I'm saying orders profit has to be greater than 100, and I'm only looking for my average sales by segment where profit is greater than 100, segment is corporate, and now this has calculated the value. So you basically see here, so it tells me 286. If you look at the profit value, so it is greater than 100. What I can do is I can even add a filter here. So for example, I can say greater than, and let's give some value here. So for example, let's go for 100, and let's see if it has done the work. So you see all the average values where it is greater than 100, and then we have to also look at our other values. We can filter it. So segment has to be corporate, and let's apply the filter here. So I will uncheck, I'll say corporate. Now this is what I'm interested in, so it tells me the corporate is sector. Now you see the sales value which is already showing up here, which we have average sales by segment, which is telling me that you have corporate segment, and it gives you where the profit values are greater than 100. Now we have this Dax here, we have applied, we have the filter, and what we can do is we can go to quickly visualization, and what I can do is I can choose this, I can add it here, and then that says me average sales by segment. However, we can go for different kind of visualization which can give us more meaning here and look at the data. So this is how you can simply use your Dax expressions. Now this is a simple quick session where you are looking at the Dax expression. So when you look at this symbol, it means it is a Dax expression. So you can obviously double click on this one, and that shows you what is your Dax expression. Now as I said, I have given two filters here, so always remember, once you have given a measure, you give your first filter, and then you can give any number of filters. You can just order it in a different line, that should be fine. Let's say average sales by segment. Okay, so let's say average sales by segment. Okay, profit greater than 100. So I can give some kind of name which basically identifies my column, and that gives me the value. Now if you see here, we have applied these filters, and that's why we are only seeing the relevant data, which is profit, which is a particular segment, and you can create any number of Dax expressions like this using some inbuilt functions. So anytime if you would want to see if your Dax expression is working fine, what you can do is, for example, I can say test function. Okay, now I would want to create a function, and then I can basically choose the available functions. As I said, you have logical functions, you have statistical functions, you have mathematical functions, you have information functions. So you have all of these options here, and you can choose one of these. So for example, we were going for average. You have and or. For example, I can directly go for and, but that would not make sense in the beginning. You can go for absolute value of something. So for example, let's choose absolute, and now I want to work on orders, so I go for orders, and here I can say, okay, I'm looking at orders, but I would be looking at sales value. I would want the exact value, so I can choose this one, right? And here, now once I am creating a function, so I can be selecting a different column. So this is basically one column. Now you can add calculation you want to do, but this basically says unexpected expression because this is a new DAG for a new column. So what I can do is I can take this out from here. I can go ahead and create a new column, and then, or a new measure. So I can do that and it works perfectly fine. Now I can save this and we can call it whatever report you would want to call. So let's say Superstore with new Dax, and you can share it, you can publish it, you can continue using it in your reports. So you can create any number of functions as such and then just save it. So for example, I have set of Dax functions and I can upload it on a GitHub link. So here, for example, if I go in here and if I click on Dax, so that tells me the different kind of visualizations I have based on the standard data. So it depends on my file, which should be existing here. So I can go in here and this should actually work, but the location has changed and I just click on open report. I can do a browse report. I can go into Power BI content and here let's look into this one and just say open. So that will not only load the report, it has different visuals and different visuals with the standard data set which comes with Microsoft, and it basically has different kind of visuals and each of those visuals again have different Dax functions, so you can use these also. So what we have learned is working on a store data set, working on some threat hunting data sets, working on our own created tables, and these are some of the pages what you see here. So this is based on the data which comes in with AWS, and you can always look into one of these and you can search. If you see here, look at this icon and it tells me, okay, this looks like a tag function, and let's double click on this one and that shows me the function what you're doing. So you're creating a function called age. It uses date difference. It works on dim customer table on the birthday date, and you would want to basically find out the date difference between now and the birthday, and you would want the year. So this is the data what you have. You can obviously choose this, you can look at the result of this and you can see the visuals. So these are some simple Dax expressions. You can create a lot of data expressions like this. Now this is here, you have date function, so I can choose which are the Dax functions which are existing here. I can just load them. So for example, this one is one of my other data sets, and then you can play around with the data here. So this is how you create your Dax expressions, and this was just a quick demo on going for some simple Dax expressions. You can create different kind of visuals and you can then save those reports. You can publish it to Power BI service, and you can then gather insights based on this. So this is how you work with Power BI, wherein you can use Dax, you can use Power BI service to gather insights, you can use desktop to work on loading your data, transforming your data in different ways, and then basically analyzing it.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.